Ahead of the Independence Day holiday, we are going to talk about the Friday market close with Jerry Gidel and have an update on his supply and demand estimates right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. If you like our channel, please stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. Hello, Jerry. How are you today? So, we are having a drop in the corn price future and also somewhat stable soybeans this Friday. Is that still a response from the USDA's acreage report?
Well, the acreage report definitely turned heads, to say the least. As I think that as somebody said that in less than 2 to 3, maybe 4 to 5 minutes here, we went from 15 to 20 down to 30 over. So we went 50 cents in very short order on that corn. And I wonder why we, instead of having a significant increase here, which we did end up having a 1.55 million increase in corn plantings and that, but there was expectations of at least another million to 1,000,001, and some estimates were even another 2 or 3 million higher than that. So when that number came in, it was a major turnaround. Soybeans did the same thing. There was no increase in the soybean U.S. soybean acreages here. It's down actually 45,000 bushels if you want to make a real close estimate there. And bushels, 45,000 acres, I should say. And so in that situation, it also responded very aggressively and actually probably did a pretty impressive performance there. Corn actually did sneak up and close near limit up. I think 1 or 2 contracts there, but no real push on it at that point. From there, which then we ended up having our weekly export sales here that came through, and they were kind of lackluster here again. Right now, I think a lot of people just decided they're going to wait to see what these stocks and acreage numbers said before they made another decision about it, anything in the export world. But the one place that there was some interest was our friends in China. They stepped up and bought another 60 million bushels of U.S. corn for 60 million bushels of beans, I should say, for new crop. And I think that's part of the reason beans maybe have hung together a little stronger the last couple of days here, going into what turns out to be a very interesting 3-day holiday here. Weather-wise, things have calmed down a little bit across the Midwest. We still had a lot of moisture here from Kansas City through Missouri and on through the Eastern Corn Belt. Not so much in Ohio, but the other side of the coin, there wasn't a lot of rain. Minnesota, the Dakotas, and much of Iowa. Nebraska, the same thing. Nebraska's 2/3, 3/4 irrigated, so maybe that's not as important on the short-term weather. But it's important to those areas in the eastern 75 to 100 miles of Nebraska, this dry land. But the interesting twist, of course, we were talking about these acreage reports, which were the real immediate factor here on the market's response on Wednesday. And that the other big numbers that come out that day were the quarterly stocks numbers. And surprisingly, us traders and analysts out here somehow have guessed a pretty good set of numbers there. There really wasn't a lot of differences from the expectations versus the reality of what the numbers were. From there, maybe a little less on wheat numbers, but we going back and forth on that. We talk from there. Corn, the number was 32 million difference. When you're talking about 4 billion worth of supplies, that's that's not even a quarter of 1%. From there, the soybeans number was also pretty well on target there. I think it was 5 or 6 million under the average guesstimate on one survey. I think actually it was a little bit more on another one. But anyway, the stocks reports here really kind of suggested that the exports and activity in both corn and beans were kind of on target. Actually, today's numbers, the USDA, excuse me, yeah, the U.S. Census Bureau put out their final numbers for May here. So we've really got an updated set of numbers here as we go towards the July USDA numbers later this month. And that, interestingly enough, the differences of the crush and also the exports here on both these sets of numbers for corn and soybeans were, interestingly, again, just a little wider spread and things along the way. So, we seem to must be shipping things into Mexico or at a more pretty aggressive pace here. There's definitely, even today, there was a big article out on the wires about crop conditions in Mexico. We've already been worried about the US, we've been worried about Canada. And today, the Mexicans put their hands in the air and says, by the way, we're pretty dry down here too. So and it's an interesting world these days. North America has had a tough go here on moisture over the first 6 months of 2021.
Yes, and this week also we had lower temperatures in South America.
That was the real twist that showed up in here, and I think it's one of these factors as I look at things going forward and how that's going to impact our 2021-22 demand structures here. After the kind of conditions that we've had, late plantings, pretty dry conditions, things of that nature, and then Antarctica sent up quite a shot of cold weather that got all the way up to Paranon here, and it hit it for 2 or 3 days of pretty tough conditions. And that, so about everybody in South America went ahead and adjusted down their corn numbers on output. The USDA is at 98 million. That's really seems like it's way out of kilter here from all the indications we're getting. In that, I think a lot of people were in the 92 number, maybe a little less than that. I got, interestingly enough, the last couple of days here since this all happened, there's lots of numbers under 90 million, and that's quite a significant differences here. And to some extent, that's going to have an impact on the U.S. corn demand in our new crop situation here. And so that's another reason why the corn market is going to be extremely sensitive to U.S. weather going forward.
And what are you seeing for the meal market? As we are also having reports of wheat crop reductions in Russia and other places.
Well, the meal market has surprisingly been has not been the strongest one of the two products. Soybean oil and that whole world, issues in the palm oil production not being as strong as it should be, and that has kept the veg oil side of the equation stronger than it traditionally is. Usually this is the time of year when the bean oil prices kind of slip away here as we get strong competition from palm oil. The meal side of things, one thing we do have going on is that there's been a huge push in Argentina after all their problems with their major crusher all last fall and early winter. I'm not sure that we've got good financial backing for that firm, but it's out crushing as many bushels that they can, and they're definitely being competitive in the world markets here on meal. So that's another reason why meal is a little sluggish here. But in reality of it is that the world is looking at wheat, and that does take a little bit of protein out of your rations because it's the higher protein of anywhere from 2 to 3% higher than corn's 8%, and that's one of the features that comes in this thing. But right now, at least, I don't know that that meals is a little bit of a heavy market here, but in the U.S., but I don't think it's one of the bigger factors as we go forward here. The weather situation and what's happening with new crop out there is going to be substantial from there. As I mentioned, with that basically smaller number out here, it's not a big number, but it's a situation where overall our differences here from expectations versus on corn and beans is about 2.5 million bushels, and that's pretty significant. And that's the reason why this market is going to be highly tuned up to weather, and that right now, at least, there's still not a lot of forecasts for rain in that north of I-80 and west of the Mississippi River into next week. I know there's some showers around again, that kind of stuff. I've made a quick figure on how many acres of corn and soybeans might be under the gun because of below normal subsoil. Now, there's been some showers around and that, but the key feature on this thing is that in the past, when things got a little tough, you could always pull up some moisture from that 10 to 15 inches below ground. And that, but because of the weather we had started last fall, and then we didn't have huge amount of snows in that region, and now this, there's a graphic floating around about how this, like, it's under 25 milliliters of moisture in the subsoil out there in that part of the world. And there we are calculating corn and soybeans. Corn's just a little less than 25 million, and the soybeans just a little bit higher than 25 million of beans and corn. That's under that stress. That's a huge amount of our percentages here of, basically 87 million beans and 92 million corn. Those are some significant portions of our crop, and it just has to have some timely moisture here on an ongoing basis to keep things together. I've seen, we've all seen some of these photos floating around here about what's happened in the northern plains, and it's not like we can say, okay, they can be fine. We can wait 2 or 3 weeks and get another rain, it'll be fine. They're not in that situation. Even if it's a half an inch, it's going to help them keep staving on, and that's the big feature.
Well, I'm not sure if you agree with me, but it seems that the futures market is indicating right now that the longer you wait, the less you'll get for your corn or beans.
Well, it has been that situation over the last month or so, as there's been optimism about expanded U.S. plantings, and the weather is maybe had a streak, and then we had some rains in the eastern corn belt and things like that. I guess the one thing is it's a real twist, and I think that's the other thing that's going to come in here as we get towards the July USDA numbers, because there's not going to be people saying, we're going to have a big increase in corn acres. The USDA has put those numbers out and that, and looking at my S&D numbers for both corn and soybeans for 2021-22, and that this latest set of numbers here really puts things in kind of an interesting perspective here. Looking at the corn number out there, this 1.5 million is definitely a positive. The USDA is most likely, and now there's people even making the question of this: will the USDA stay at their 179.5 bushel yield? I'd have to say that's probably not. There's not too many people out there believe that we're going to be at that level, considering the conditions we've had to this point. Now, things can change. We can always have that complete change west of the Mississippi and everybody be in great shape. But I'd have to say that even then, with those expanded acres, actually what this does on the USDA's number, if they left everything unchanged on their demand side of the number and this expanded acreage, it'll probably puts us back up around 1.5, 1.55 on carryover stock for 2021-22, which we were 2 months ago. So it didn't really give us a whole bunch of extra bushels here to work with. Now, the other twist of this thing is that I kind of feel like that there's probably a little bit of old crop demand here that might pick up a little bit more. I kind of look at ethanol might be up 25. I stare at this exports. I kind of feel like it might be higher because of what just happened in Brazil. And that, I guess the big question is, will somebody feel like they want to grab some old crop stocks before September 1? That could happen. It might not. I'm going to leave it alone for now. I think the big question for corn for the next growing season is just what we mentioned earlier here today. The impact of this freeze condition, plus the problems there, the likelihood of the USDA's 2021-22 exports they're going to increase. This 2.45 they're using is just way too low. I think it's at least 200 million up, and you put that together with maybe a more realistic yield number for the coming year at 177. Surprise, surprise, our carryover stock here in July for the coming year could be 1.1 or less, could be even 1 billion. And that puts a huge factor going forward here. The world has to continue to do maximum kind of output if we're going to keep these prices from not being pretty volatile. So I think that's traditionally July and August, the market's made in the U.S. and everybody's kind of slipping down on a seasonal basis. I'm not saying that isn't a normal case. I'm wondering that this year and the years like we've had very high prices, 2008 was year 2012. We had some of our highest prices in the July and August. So I'm not saying we're making new highs, but I sure think that this market's going to be quite sensitive to weather based on corn. We don't want to forget about the soybeans. I don't know there's going to be a lot of change from the USDA soybean number on the old crop side of things. I kind of feel like that the crush might be a tad low, but I'm not going to fight with that. The biggest thing is interesting is that if you take the new revised number here on production, on acreages and harvested acres, and there's a little twist there too, by the way, with the slight decline in plantings, we actually had a higher harvested number, which is always interesting from the USDA. I don't disagree. They had a pretty wide one before, but interestingly enough, you take off 50 bushel, right now the USDA is using 50.8. You just take that 0.8 of a bushel off of there on our numbers here. And that takes off surprisingly 70 million bushels out of our production. Just that 0.8 of a bushel. That's not a huge change in that. And you run that through the system and we were at 155. So, if you take 70 million off of that 155, you're down under 90 million. So you've got to also come around and reduce the crush for the coming year. And I think will be the place that has to happen because, high cost feeds, they're going to start looking at alternatives, and protein gets expensive, then it could be the factor. So that's the interesting twist is that it doesn't take very much to put these both corn and soybeans ending carryover stocks. And these are not talking about numbers like, oh, we got to go down 10% on beans, or we got to go down 10% on corn to get these tight carryover stocks. They're right up, they're just right there. So that's the twist of this thing. We're going to be still very volatile about what the weather's doing here, what it's doing in other parts of the country. And that definitely China's even itself. We've kind of heard bumbles around China's weather not being as good as it could be. And along with with the South American problems we've heard in Brazil very recently. So there's still plenty of summer left and plenty of margins and emotions that's going to hit these markets here as we go through the July and August periods but producers out there also have to understand that this thing gets a little round up on things. It's always good to take a little bit of the advance. And if you've got some crops like in the Eastern Corn Belt where you've got feel like you're going to have a decent size opportunity. And I wouldn't really tell to somebody up in Northwest Iowa or in the Dakotas that they should be selling a huge amount of their crop, because they're very tender up there about what they're going to have. But that's unfortunately what happens in the world of commodities. Some people have a crop, and the other person has to be very judicious about how he markets his supplies as it goes through the years. But today, we're kind of taking a Friday here, and everybody's kind of waiting to see what next week's weather turns out to be. And if we continue to not have many showers move through the northern part of the U.S. and Canada, things could get quite emotional here over the next 6 weeks.
All right, Jerry. Thanks a lot for your analysis.
Always good to be with you, Louis, and have not that you're ready for a 4th of July celebration, but enjoy the 3 days off.